Welcome back to the Collegiate Athletics Advocate. My name is Will. Today we're going to discuss the Pac-12 and analyze the state of the conference, as it were. When the Conference of Champions lost 10 of its members last year, the overwhelming sentiment was that it would be the end of the conference. However, Oregon State and Washington State would find themselves revitalized by a victory in a lawsuit against the departing members over the rights to the profits and intellectual property of the Pac-12. This would give them the financial boost in the realm of $200 to $300 million that they needed to be able to rebuild the conference. They would subsequently poach Boise State, San Diego State, Colorado State, and Fresno State in one fell swoop from the Mountain West Conference. This was possible in large part due to the fact that it was done without the Mountain West knowing. What followed were a few weeks of uncertainty and realignment speculation by college football journalists and fans alike, with schools from UNLV to Memphis to UConn being touted as the next possible addition to the Pac-12. What actually happened, however, were the additions of Utah State from the Mountain West and Gonzaga from the West Coast Conference. These schools weren't quite what people were expecting, and there was some initial backlash, especially from the Mountain West fans who were upset at the fact that 5 of the top brands in their conference had just been poached. People on the outside who didn't like how the Pac was conducting its business. Side note, I am a Pac-12 homer, of course, admittedly, but I also hold no ill will towards the Mountain West and understand their frustration, as it's not dissimilar to what happened to the Pac. I can't truly justify it to those folks who are fans and who have suffered at this, but given everything that's happened in conference realignment, I've chosen to chalk it up as just business. Unfortunately, that is the way of the world at the moment. All that being said, I believe the additions that have been made so far are the best ones that they could make. So let's start by taking a look at the media DMAs, or designated market areas. As we can see here, every single one of the DMAs is in the top 100 of 210 by Nielsen rating in the United States. And the 3 bottom schools all rely on national brand recognition, specifically Boise and Gonzaga. Fresno State at 55 with the Fresno Visalia DMA is the least national of those 3 brands, just kind of in general. But their brand is also it extends its influence throughout California's Central Valley, which is evidenced by the green V that is in their logo and displayed on their field and on the back of their helmets, since they're the only FBS team in the region, which stretches from Sacramento to Bakersfield along State Highway 66. As you can see here, it includes the likes of Stockton, Modesto, and Oakdale, amongst others. And this influence is strengthened by the fact that the vast majority of graduates remain in the valley. This influence may lessen in the future if Sacramento State is able to rise to FBS. More so if it's in a position of prominence and significance, but the Sacramento, Stockton, Modesto DMA is number 20, and Bakersfield is number 125. These numbers just aren't insignificant. We have to take them into account when thinking about Fresno State's influence inside the state of California. The California Valley is also super important just as a recruiting zone. Also, I know that people are going to come at me in the comments for giving the big city DMAs to the top 4 schools on that list. The reality, though, is that those are the primary DMAs for these schools. They're all the top 2 university brands in their respective state university system. In Utah, BYU is a private institution for all of you haters. So they share the big city DMAs with their counterparts, as a vast majority of the alums settle in those big cities. Argue if you want, but that's truly how it works, I promise. And if you guys really want to argue about it, then we can create a discussion for a future episode to talk about it. But I'm not going to waste any more time on this episode talking about it. And on that note, let's move on to the strength of the athletic programs. Now, money isn't everything, but it is a lot. This is just straight from NBC's list of the top 75 most valuable collegiate athletic programs. Besides the remaining Pac-2, the obvious top brands are SDSU and Boise. Gonzaga in basketball, of course, also speaks for itself given its recent historical dominance of the WCC as well as its impressive NCAA tournament record, both of which established them as a national basketball brand. It's hard not to do when you make multiple Final Fours. However, let's look more at the historical revenue-generating sports, football and men's basketball, to break this down and get a better look at the rest of the conference. Here, we can see a list of football conference champions. The collection of 5 schools from the Mountain West that are headed to the PAC are the only ones currently in the conference that have ever won a conference title in football. The exception is technically San Jose State, but that was in the COVID season, which was not a full season, and in my mind, at the very least, really kind of lives with an asterisk on it. Obviously, there are areas to be improved in this realm, with Colorado State only having historical success and not having a title since 2002, and Utah State only having a single title. However, both of these programs are still building and have a tremendous amount of upside with good financial investment in athletics, media market value, and alumni support. Moving on to men's basketball, we can see here the list of conference championships as well as tournament appearances. This is, of course, a bit more evenly distributed. However, each added program has shown some level of success, and many significantly. The next part of this analysis brings me to the emerging revenue sports, women's basketball and baseball. Looking first at women's basketball, here's a list of conference championships and tournament appearances. Once again, we can see a good amount of historical success, with the exception being Utah State. The hope is that they'll begin working on improving that, but it is an area of concern given that the university is still battling some Title IX allegations and lawsuits from years past. That being said, Utah State was a bit of a desperation ad, just kind of in the scheme of things, and given the new PAC needed more schools at the time to avoid further issues with the formation of the conference, it doesn't justify it, but it does make more sense that they have less titles. I believe they're shouldering more of their exit fees. I could be wrong, but I believe that is the agreement. So they definitely are paying their way. It's not like the rest of the 4. Moving on to baseball now. It isn't much of a revenue generator unless you're an SEC school, really, but with Oregon State and Gonzaga's baseball success and the value that they place on those programs, it is still important to note. As it stands, only San Diego State and Fresno State will be bringing in baseball programs to join Oregon State, Washington State, and Gonzaga, but those two have seen historical success, with San Diego State holding the most ever conference titles, as well as some recent success with Fresno State having 2 of the last 4 conference championships to their name. To be recognized as an NCAA baseball conference, there must be at least 6 programs in that conference. Boise State has said that it is possible they may revive their baseball program once again if needed. Their last effort in this regard came just before COVID, when the program came back to varsity status just prior to the onset of the pandemic, and was quickly killed again by that same pandemic. However, depending on the next edition, that revival may not be necessary. I'll get into those next editions in an episode which I'll have out shortly, as I don't want to be too late for that. Another episode coming out likely before that edition's episode is a discussion about the Pac-12 media rights, since those will be reported on. Apparently, they'll be decided prior to the next editions to the conference. Until then, I encourage you guys to subscribe so you can follow along, like this video if you enjoyed it, and leave a comment telling me why you didn't if that's the case. I hope you're all going to have a great rest of your day or night, and please be well. Thanks for coming.